Our third lesson this morning is from 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses help? Little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A retired preacher in his 80s remembers all the sermons he heard in his youth about Christian martyrdom and giving it your all. He remembers all those sermons in which the lineup of illustrations were Albert Schweitzer, Mother Teresa, and missionaries who had their feet frozen off in the tundra of the north. As a young man sitting in church listening to those stories with a few Napoleon stories thrown in, he just sat there swinging his legs over the pew and said to himself, "It's a shame you can't be a Christian in this little town. Nobody is chasing or imprisoning Christians around here." And the boy went to a Christian camp in the summer, and he remembers singing an old hymn, "Are You Able?" at the lakeside, with handheld candles, and going back to the dorm and laying on the bunk and saying to God, "Yes, I'm able. I'll give my life." And he pictured himself running in front of a train and rescuing a child, or swimming out and getting someone who was drowning. He even pictured himself holding firm to the faith under threat of execution and becoming a martyr. "I was sincere then," the retired preacher said, "as I have been in the more than 50 years since. I gave my life, but nobody warned me that I couldn't write one big check. I've had to write over 50 years worth of little checks, 87 cents, 21 cents, $1.03, just nibbled away at this giving of life." So our passage today from 1 John begins by saying that we know love by this, that Jesus laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. And for most of us, our experience will be like that of the retired preacher. We'll find that we end up giving our lives away 87 cents at a time. Now, adjusted for inflation, that 87 cents is now worth $11.92, but I think we understand the main point. And we also know that even in our time, martyrdom is not unheard of. In countries such as North Korea, Nigeria, Somalia, in the Sudan, parts of India, whether this is official government persecution or persecution at the hands of different militia groups, Christians face intense persecution, including risk of imprisonment or death. And I remember several years ago how 147 Christians were killed in Kenya just days before Easter, most of them shot on the spot, simply for being Christian. And so indeed, even in our day, martyrdom, real martyrdom, is not unheard of. And risking our lives in an attempt to save others is not unheard of either. When I lived in New York, one of our church members was injured in a train accident that killed 6 people and injured many others. Thankfully, he recovered and wasn't too seriously injured. But among the injured was a 20-year-old nursing student who happened to be an EMT and a crew chief with a volunteer ambulance corps. And on the evening of the crash, after she had finished her classes for the day, she was traveling home in the first car of the train. A driver of an SUV got caught at a railroad crossing as the train was coming closer, and instead of backing up, panicked, went forward, and ended up colliding with the train. The driver of the SUV was killed instantly, and the electrified third rail pierced the first cabin of the train, causing the death of the 5 people seated behind the nursing student. And she didn't leave the accident scene to avoid the fire or the odors of gas or the cries of the badly injured. Instead, at great personal risk, she stayed and used her rescue experience and life-saving skills to aid others, and then substituted as an acting crew chief on an ambulance caring for patients being transported to the nearest hospital. What a remarkable young woman. And she did all of this even though she herself had been injured in the crash. We know all too well that there may be times when we are called to help someone at great personal risk to ourselves. And yet, for most of us, the life of Christian discipleship is likely to consist of giving away our lives $11.92 at a time. One of my favorite sayings from Francis of Assisi is, "Preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words." I've always loved that quote. And one time I wanted to learn more about the specific context of that quote. And I was dismayed when I discovered that it's possible that Francis never said it. There's no record of that saying in any of the writings about Francis for the first 200 years after his death. And if you think about it, Francis was the founder of an order of preachers. Is he really going to say, don't use words? Or use words only when necessary? I'm a preacher, and I'm not going to say don't use words either. I like words, and a good portion of my week is spent trying to string together words to share with you on a Sunday. Now, what Francis did write in his instructions was for all the brothers to preach with their deeds. And so maybe a better way of paraphrasing Francis might be to say, preach with your words and preach with your deeds, and make sure that they match. May the preaching you do with your deeds and the preaching that you do with your words match up. And indeed, 1 John itself encourages words. It encourages testimony about Christ, about our love for one another. And the main thing is that our words match our actions. And Christians are not the only ones who give of themselves sacrificially in support of a cause larger than themselves, or to risk their lives trying to save others. But when Christians give of themselves, there's a very specific story behind it. In 1 John, it states at the beginning of today's reading that we know love by this, that Jesus laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. There are all kinds of very good reasons for being involved in mission projects. The feeling of community, the feeling of helping others in need, that's all important. But we also have a story that Jesus laid down his life for us, and this is our own pattern, even if it is only $11.92 at a time. After I dropped out of law school and before I started seminary, I got a part-time job grading the essays that 8th grade students across the state of Texas wrote as part of their standardized testing. Each essay had to be read by 2 readers, and if the 2 readers didn't agree on a score, the essay went to a 3rd reader. And somehow I was fortunate enough to be chosen as a 3rd reader, which meant I got to read all the tests that were right on the cusp, and I had to decide which way to go. But one of my colleagues was an 85-year-old retired English teacher who liked to stay active. And we had a small birthday party in her honor during one of our breaks. And we learned that another way that she kept busy was that she would write constant letters to members of the Texas state legislature protesting the incarceration rates of youth, particularly Black and Hispanic youth in the state of Texas. She not only wrote letters, but she made phone calls. She did everything she could to pester the state authorities in Texas. And people around the table were asking her, "Do you enjoy that?" "Not really," she said. "Do you get paid? Are you on any kind of salary?" "Of course not," she replied. "Have any of your children or grandchildren ever been in trouble with the law? Is that why you're doing this?" "No," she said. "Then why in the world would you spend all this time doing this work that isn't particularly fun?" And she replied, "Because I have to. Because I'm a Christian." And that was the first time that we had heard her speak explicitly about her faith. But what she said spoke volumes. And what she did spoke even louder. We know love by this, that Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. Again, even if it is only $11.92 at a time. All glory and praise be to our God. Amen.